It is the year 1492 Dale Reckoning, and the heavens are stirring. As Cyric, the Prince of Lies, and Bhaal, the Lord of Murder, act on old grudges and vengeance once thought buried, mortals draw steel and shed blood in their name. Beleaguered by the warfare between foul deities, a great host of liberated slaves and victims of circumstance turned holy crusaders marches from the southern deserts, beneath the banner of the one called the Chosen of Bhaal. Their noble task is to completely and utterly eradicate the minions of the dark gods vying for control of their seat in the heavens. Though the host of devotees to Bhaal and Cyric is great, there are three figures that draw the greatest of ire from the exalted march known as the Inquisition. Garin the Graveclaw, Grand Duke Zhermong Baylorfist, Lufir Free Elf, Lord of the Crimson Maw. From once humble beginnings, these three men were hurled into the proverbial center stage of the realms for their pledge to serve the newly resurrected Lord of Murder. Their tale is one of odd circumstance, fate and despair in the face of a cruel and uncaring world. To seek the heart of the Inquisition's grand crusade, one must look back on the beginnings of these three men, once ordinary adventurers turned agents of strife and discord. It begins with the time of troubles, a world-shaking divine crisis over 100 years ago. A cunning duo of gods, Bane and Merkul, made an attempt to steal the Tablets of Fate, incomprehensibly powerful stones that laid bare the responsibilities and portfolios given to each deity in the cosmos. Ao, the Overfather, angered by those gods beneath his omniscient purview and their constant pursuit of power at the expense of their mortal followers, cast out the gods as punishment for their arrogant theft of the tablets. The gods were made to walk the earth as mortals, powerful, yet vulnerable. The year that followed was one of great upheaval, which saw many gods perish, and a select few mortals rise to divinity. One of these cursed mortal gods, however, refused to go quietly. Bhaal, the Lord of Murder, foresaw his own death at the hands of a mortal man, and took great strides to ensure his resurrection. He impregnated a great many mortal women, creating many heirs touched by his divine essence, known as the Bhaal spawn. Bhaal's foreseen fate eventually came to pass. The upstart Cyric, wielding the sword Godsbane, slew Bhaal's mortal avatar atop the Borskare Bridge near the city of Scornabel. As Bhaal's blood flowed into and permanently poisoned the winding water below, Cyric stole Bhaal's very divinity and rose to the heavens as the god of murder and deception, among other foul things. Bhaal's essence, however, lived on in his many children. Sowing chaos in their passage regardless of their intention, the Bhaal spawn returned their Lord Father's essence with their deaths. Some scions of murder learned of their heritage and forsook their divine progenitor in favor of their own goals and plots for divine ascension. Others still chose to fight their murderous origins, to do good upon the realms, the circumstances of birth be damned. One such person was a gifted adventurer by the name of Kael Deadcrown, and like many mortals whose destinies shake the very foundation of the heavens, his origins were humble indeed. Nestled atop the cliffs that rise from the Sword Coast, the citadel of Candelstick houses the finest and most comprehensive collection of writings on the face of Faerun. It is an imposing fortress, kept in strict isolation from the intrigues that occasionally plague the rest of the Forgotten Realms. It is secluded, highly regimented, and most importantly, it was the home of the one who came to be known as the Bhaal spawn. Kael Deadcrown lived a simple life within the library fortress's walls as the adopted son of the wise old sage Gorion. Though a troublemaker in his youth, Kael displayed remarkable aptitude in both sword and sorcery for a half-elf of his age. His peaceful existence was cut short when his adopted father ushered him in a desperate flight away from the supposedly impenetrable walls of Candlekeep, citing ill intent from assailants yet unknown. During their egress, they were waylaid by a mysterious armored figure who slew Gorion as Kael made his escape. Finding friends among Gorion's old companions in the Harpers, Kael put his martial and magical training to work as he investigated the Iron Crisis of the Sword Coast, hoping that his pursuits would somehow lead him to the identity of the armored figure who wished him harm. Others joined him upon this quest, leading to great fame and fortune as the conspiracy surrounding the iron shortage began to unfold before Kael's unyielding blade. During his pursuits in Baldur's Gate and the surrounding countryside, Kael learned of Bhaal's myriad children and his identity as one of the many Bhaal spawn in the realms. Having foiled the plans of his brother, Kael exacted his vengeance for the death of his foster father by slaying Sarevok in the heart of an abandoned temple of Bhaal, deep below the city of Baldur's Gate. Though hailed as a hero for stopping his brother's murderous intentions, Kael's divine heritage continued to draw unwanted attention. He was briefly roped into a crusade against an incursion of demons to the north, near the Boriskare Bridge where Bhaal was slain years prior, and was later framed for the murder of the only daughter of Grand Duke Intar Silvershield of Baldur's Gate. With rumors of his parentage coming to light, Kael was forced to flee the city that once called him a hero. He and a select number of trusted companions fled south to Am, intending to continue their adventuring careers without fear of judicial reprisal for a murder they did not commit. Kael and his party were eventually ambushed and kidnapped by the devilishly cunning wizard, John Irenicus, who sought to extract Kael's divinity for his own purposes. Once a powerful but prideful resident of the grand elven city of Suldanesalar, Irenicus was stripped of his elvendom by Queen Elisine for attempting to use the Great Tree of Life to ascend to godhood. With Kael's stolen divinity in hand, Irenicus attempted to replicate his prior feat in retribution against his former people, but was stopped by the timely intervention of Deadcrown and his companions. With his divinity returned to him, Kael's attention was turned to the rapidly culminating prophecy of Bhaal's revival. 5 powerful Bhaal spawn, appropriately named the Five, enacted a masterful plot to gather all of the realm's Bhaal spawn in the nation of Tethir and slaughter them, in turn restoring portions of Bhaal's divinity. Each of the 5 held their own ambitions for the returning essence of Bhaal, but their plans were cut short by Kael Deadcrown's intervention and their subsequent deaths. The aptly named War of the Bhaal spawn culminated in a battle atop the very throne of Bhaal, fought between Kael Deadcrown's party and the last and greatest high priestess of Bhaal, Amelisande the Black-Hearted. With the greater part of Bhaal's divine essence now rightfully his, Kael was faced with a choice: to embrace the divinity of his father and ascend to godhood with his own aims and goals, or to cast away the essence of Bhaal to the outer planes and live out his life as a mortal man. Kael chose the latter and returned to the city of Baldur's Gate. Revered once again as a hero, Deadcrown continued adventuring for a time until he settled down as one of the newly elected Grand Dukes of Baldur's Gate. The War of the Bhaal spawn, however, would go on to have lasting effects on the Forgotten Realms for years to come. In a quiet village in rural Tethir, bordering the city of Saradush, a family of dwarves known as the Twigbeards made an honest life out of farming the land. When news came of the invading fire giant siege of Saradush, led by the Bhaal spawn Yaga Shora, several of the Twigbeards took up arms to defend their country. The scion of the family, a talented herbalist and tea brewer named Garen, followed his father into war against the fire giants. To Garen's great sorrow, his father was slain in the fall of Saradush, the city's walls weakened in the absence of Kael Deadcrown as he hunted for Yagashora's weakness. As the city crumbled about him, and the life drained from his father's body, Garen fell into a deep despair even as Yagashora was slain. The young dwarf returned home to find it razed to the ground by the invaders, leaving the last of the Twigbeard alone in the realms. With nothing left to go back to, Garen fled into the nearby woods and disappeared. Several decades after the end of the War of the Bhaal spawn, the realms grew relatively quiet. In these calm times, a young man of an elf named Luxador Balorfist decided to settle down from the conniving life of a con artist to start a family with the woman he loved, with whom he had one son named Ixion. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to Luxador, his wife was one of the few surviving Bhaal spawn children still surviving in the realms after the war. Ixion inherited the essence and murderous tendencies of the Bhaal spawn and became a trouble child despite the best efforts of his parents. This culminated in one fateful night when Luxador returned home to find his wife dead at a young Ixion's feet, apparently through a struggle. Unable to kill his own flesh and blood, but also unable to continue looking at the one who killed his wife, Luxador gave Ixion to a temple of Helm in the hopes that the priests and the clerics could raise the child to suppress his murderous urges and sociopathic tendencies. Intent on outrunning his failures as a father, Luxador decided to pay for his travel expenses by taking on the most lucrative profession known to man: adventuring. Luxador went west, past the city of Baldur's Gate to the island city of Galdurgard, where a new and thriving community had been built around the tower of the archwizard Galdur. Opportunity awaited those willing to brave ruins and caves on the shoreline of surrounding isles and landmasses, and Luxador aimed to take advantage of these lucrative prospects. After several months of making a name for himself with a number of successful expeditions and dungeon delves, Luxador planned to leave town for the next settlement on his aimless road to nowhere. That evening, the quiet night suddenly exploded into a cacophony of screeches and ghostly wails, as hundreds upon thousands of spirits were loosed from some hidden prison below. Homes crumbled, entire patches of land sank into the deep, and malevolent spirits ripped innocents into pieces as they rampaged through the area. Luxador was one of a select lucky few that managed to escape on an abandoned boat, and was faced with a chance encounter with a number of strangers that would change his life forever. Velry Gildencoin, a kindly dwarven cleric of Lathander, on a pilgrimage of charity. Fornius, a lost human druid searching for a purpose after the destruction of his home conclave. King Long, a traveling dragonborn fighter seeking opponents to further his mastery of the blade. Brachus Greycastle, a charming half-elven sorcerer looking for beauties to woo with tales of adventure. Arathiel Ashenpetal, a kind elven ranger and resident protector of the shores of Galdurgard from monstrous threats. And Garion Embermantle, a noble scion of the mainland city of Scornabel studying magic at the Tower of Galdurgard. These individuals banded together along with Luxador and made their desperate escape, eventually shipwrecking on an unmarked island. The troubles of the party fleeing from the mysterious spectral uprising compounded as they stumbled into a trap entrance to an ancient cursed ruin. Awash with magical darkness, the party survived their foray into the dungeon by the mercy of an enchanted candlestick in Garion's possession, allowing them to dispel the darkness and see the monstrous inhabitants of the dismal place. After escaping the ruin and finding their way back to civilization, the party agreed that their abilities combined made for an apt adventuring party. At a creaky table in a dive bar out in the slums of Baldur's Gate, the adventuring party known as the Order of the Candelstick was born. The Order of the Candelstick persisted as an adventuring party for several years, and the group became fast companions throughout their daring exploits. They braved mazes packed with minotaurs, liberated would-be slaves from orcish raiding camps, put an end to devious wizards, and even stopped a cult from summoning a demon into the midst of an innocent village. They earned much fame and wealth in their time, but the party soon began to be pulled away by their growing commitments outside of the realm of adventure. Valerie yearned to return to her home church and become a leading cleric of Lathander. Fornius wished to establish a new druidic coven of his own. King Long wished to pass on his perfection of the blade to the perfect student. Brachus and Arathiel wished to live out their recent marriage in a safer and more domestic manner, and Luxador had a chance encounter with an abandoned tiefling orphan. Naming the baby Zhermong, Luxador realized he had a second chance at fatherhood, and announced that the next adventure would be the Order's last. Garion proposed the perfect quest to cleanse the fallen city of Galdurgard from its spectral plague and discover its source, a fitting end for the party founded upon Galdurgard's destruction. The party returned to Galdurgard years after its fall, finding little more than spirit-infested rubble. The task at hand became less of a labor of reclamation, but of purification, as the Order of the Candlestick drove out the undead from the ruins of the city. Garion led the expedition into a series of underground catacombs, where he theorized the undead had risen from, and hoped to stem the flow of spirits, or put them to rest. Once the party reached the sanctum at the heart of the catacombs, they discovered a remarkably well-preserved body, utterly bursting with magical power. Garion locked the party within the deep chamber, and confessed the true cause of the spectral explosion years prior, and the original purpose of the catacombs. Garion's master, an aging necromancer named Malverian, stumbled upon an ancient temple of Bhaal beneath Galdurgard during his studies at the tower. The temple housed not only the buried remains of hundreds of Bhaalite cultists who lived and died within, but also a magical urn containing a small but priceless sliver of Bhaal's divine essence. Malverian enlisted the help of his young apprentice Garion, an ambitious arcane scholar desperate for relevance beyond his family's lordship over the city of Scornabel, to find a way to harness the power of Bhaal's urn in a ritual aiming to raise Malverian as a lich. Using Bhaal's urn, Malverian hoped to harness what divine energy laid within during the ritual to mold himself into the most powerful lich to ever cross the realms. The experiment, however, backfired horribly when the use of the urn caused all the spirits of the Bhaalite cultists to rise from their graves and assault the living. Leaving his master's partial lich body behind, Garion miraculously escaped the destruction of the city that was his own doing, and lied about his involvement in the tragedy for years as he traveled with the Order of the Candelstick. The quest to cleanse the ruins of Galdurgard was in fact a trap designed to lead Garion's companions into the heart of the Temple of Bhaal for a second attempt at the ritual. Garion had hoped that the souls of his powerful companions would be sufficient to drive the experiment towards success, but his former friends fought back and defeated both Malverion's demi-lich form and Garion as well. Before the killing blow could be struck, the sunken temple began to crumble, leading the Order to abandon Garion for dead and save themselves. With their memories and even the name of their prestigious company tainted by the knowledge that it was entirely false pretense on Garion's part, the Order of the Candlestick had a tragic falling out as they bickered and argued over how they could have acted differently to see Garion for who he truly was. In the end, they agreed that it was best that they end their companionship and go their separate ways, to lead their own lives and remember only the best of their exploits. Velry would return to her temple in the city of Athkatla and take her position as High Cleric of Lathander, a position she bore proudly as she tutored many a hopeful priest. Fornius grew distrustful of human nature, and retreated into the woods to build a conclave of vicious druids out in the woods of the western heartlands, bent on stopping the spread of civilization wherever they could. Kinglong departed into the mountains, determined as ever to find a worthy pupil to carry his knowledge of the sword. Arathiel and Brachus settled down near the city of Daggerford and had a child they named Lufir. Luxador used his wealth from adventuring to set up a traveling carnival, and raised his adopted son Zhermong to be the best at deception and conniving, to both entertain and play the role of the charlatan. Garion would eventually claw his way out of the ruins of Galdurgard once more, and return to Scornabel, where he would raise a daughter after succeeding his father to the city's throne. He reburied his master in a secret location, and continued to plot an experimental approach to pushing the boundaries of lichdom, as he played the part of a benevolent leader of the people by daylight. With the Order of the Candlestick disbanded, with many threads of destiny left unresolved, the whims of fate saw fit to bring the successors of the Order together decades later. In the year 1481, Dale Reckoning, the city of Scornabel suffered from an incursion of unnaturally agitated forest animals that preyed upon caravan and farmland alike. An upswing in bandit activity came to follow, led by opportunists looking to take advantage of the chaos afforded by the animals driven wild. The caravan city, as Scornabel was often called, became the perfect prowling ground for fledgling warriors and wizards alike, seeking their first foray into the adventuring career. In the small tavern on the edge of the caravan city known as the Ivory Eye, 7 strangers were gathered. Was it by coincidence, by intent, or by fate? None are sure, but the meeting of these 7 souls would spur great change upon the realms. These 7 men, each with their own cause and creed. Corin Dinch, half-orc fighter. Corin was raised in an orc village as a soldier, but his protective nature made him the perfect guardian for the clan's war priest. After too many years of witnessing the horrid rituals dedicated to Grumsh, the god of all orcs, Corin stormed out of his home village to the open road, never looking back. He traveled for a time with a mysterious dragonborn swordmaster, who taught Corin the artistry of the blade, and bade him to find a just cause to lend his blade to. Degra, human cleric. An exiled priest of Lathander from the city of Athkatla, Degra sought redemption for the misdeeds that saw him cast out from his home church. His faith in the Morning Lord steeled against the coming trials, Degra uttered more than one lonely prayer to the coming dawn as he made his way to Scornabel by recommendation of the High Priestess. Fanshir Ortanyel, elven monk. Hailing from a monastery in the Sunset Mountains, Fanshir was tasked with a pilgrimage, a rite of passage journey across the land, with the ultimate goal of finding something to bring of use back to the monastery. Seeking enlightenment on his anointed trek, Fanshir's travels led him to the city of Scornabel, where his burgeoning command of the 4 elements would be of much use. Darvin Greycastle, half-elven sorcerer. As an aging arcanist long since estranged from the family he neglected during his pursuits of great magical power, Darvin had long sought to find and reconcile with the grandson he had never met. With more magic than years left in him, Darvin elected to spend his twilight years trying to make the world a better place for the grandchild he would never come to know. Rugnar Twigbeard, dwarven druid. A gruff and downtrodden denizen of the woods, Rugnar spent many a decade in the forest of the western heartlands as he endeavored to live closer to nature. As he ventured to Scornabel chasing rumors of exotic pets, the reclusive hermit was driven to find the cause of the rampaging animals and put a stop to whatever unnatural threat that was posed to the natural order. Zhermong Balorfist, tiefling rogue. Raised in a traveling carnival to be the cunning man he was, Zhermong owed everything to the kind elf Luxador, who adopted him after he was abandoned as an infant. Luxador had since been sold into slavery to pay off steep gambling debts, and Zhermong's pursuit of his father's trail brought him right to the Ivory Eye Tavern. Perhaps in exchange for helping to solve the mystery of the rampaging animals, Zhermong could uncover information to bring him closer to Luxador's captors. Lufir Free Elf, Elven Ranger. Lufir lost his parents at a very young age to rampaging slavers, who kidnapped the infant elven boy to sell after he aged. Lufir endured his entire childhood as a scout for a gang of bandits that purchased him, and after a fortuitous hunting accident, he managed to escape into freedom. Without the guidance from the parents he never knew, Lufir's struggle to find his place in the world brought him to the Caravan City, where his abilities as a ranger made him uniquely suited for the task of subduing the rampaging beasts. The owner of the Ivory Eye, an aged half-orc with a prosthetic eye named Agnes Dawnskull, gave a missive to the trio of Fanchir, Lufir, and Rugnar as thanks for saving his busboy, a halfling man named Spry Finley, from rabid beasts in the wilderness. The missive detailed the official call for adventurers to eradicate the bandits taking advantage of the chaos poised by the crazed beasts, and the missive was shared with the 4 remaining adventurers in the tavern. The 7 gathered would-be mercenaries made their way to Ambermantle Manor, where they met the lord of the city, Garion Ambermantle, a beloved statesman and accomplished wizard. Accompanying Garion was his young daughter Meridia, a sickly yet stunningly beautiful woman following in her father's footsteps of magic and statecraft. Meridia, blessed by celestial blood somewhere in the lineage of her deceased mother, was notably an Aasimar, a mortal with a heritage steeped in divinity that manifested itself in many different ways, beauty being one of the most common traits in such blessed individuals. Such a sickly disposition was odd for one so prone to serenity by virtue of her very blood, but Meridia made up for her frailty with kind words and soft gazes, 2 things that left Lufir instantly smitten with the young heiress. Garion laid out the quest at hand, to eliminate the largest host of bandits, and then to discover and destroy the source of the agitation in the local beasts. The party set out that very afternoon and easily located the bandits, whom they proceeded to trounce handily in combat. Through the combined efforts of Corin's interrogation of a surviving bandit and Lufir's tracking abilities, the party was able to track a large contingent of rabid animals to a secluded, dying grove. The grove was being tended to by a group of druids trying to save the wilting plants of the area, and upon discovering the presence of the party, they immediately commanded local creatures to attack, thus confirming that druid forces were behind the rampaging beasts. After slaying the druids, the party returned to Scornabel to deliver their discovery to Lord Ambermantle, who rewarded them generously and promised more for continued service to the Caravan City. The party resumed their hunt then the following morning and tracked down the druidic circle to their home in a secluded cave in the nearby woods of Scornabel. With luck, tenacity, and the help of Lufir's newly tamed pet wolf, Khal Doggo, the adventurers tore a swath through the coven of druids and delved right into the heart of the cave. Awaiting them was the archdruid of the druid circle, a tree-like human man named Fornius, who immediately attacked the party. After an intense bout, Rugnar killed Fornius by transforming into a bear and mauling the man, ending the threat of angry animals to the city. Found upon Fornius's body was a manifesto detailing the fanatical beliefs of the archdruid and his sect. The majority of the manifesto claimed that civilization was a blight upon the natural state of the world, and that Scornabel was a grave offender with its myriad caravaneers and travelers departing day in and day out. However, the manifesto also revealed that the sad state of the grove found by the party a day prior was not the doing of the druids. In fact, the state of the grove was what prompted the druids to coerce the local animals into running wild over the land in the first place, believing that the dying grove was a sign of the corruption of nature by modern influence. The party decided to investigate the grove once again before returning to the city, and found a secret switch that opened up a hidden door in a large boulder that led to a dark stairwell. The stairs descended into an elaborate underground complex, home to a number of undead guards and ghostly inhabitants. The complex also bore a number of deadly traps and strange puzzles. A hidden lever disguised as a candlestick thoroughly amused the party so that Lufir memorialized the moment in his journal, proudly proclaiming the party to be the Order of the Candlestick, and in spite of Lufir's lackluster spelling ability, the name stuck. A number of magical items, such as a ruby 20-sided die known as Vriska Sorket's ruby die, were found as well. Through the final door of the complex, the party stumbled upon the festering body of a sleeping demi-lich. Given the negative energy enacted by such a foul feat of necromancy, it was clear that the lich's presence was the cause of the sorry state of the grove above, and thus was the cause behind the actions of the local druids. As they were yet incapable of destroying even a dormant lich on their own, the party decided to report their findings to Lord Ambermantle as quickly as possible. Gary and Ambermantle congratulated the party on a job well done, and though the news of the lich was indeed alarming, it was soothing news to hear that the immediate threat to Scornabel had been dealt with. Garion assured the Order of the Candelstick that the matter of the lich would be passed to the more capable hands of the resident high clerics of the city, and that the party would be named heroes of the city in the meantime. Meridia Ambermantle, more stricken by illness than usual, expressed some concern about her father's relative dismissal of the lich problem, but was nonchalantly reassured by Garion to await the intervention of the local priests. The ceremony that followed was ordinary, with the adventurers to be commended by Captain Teravald of the local city guard. When the time came for the rewards to be given, however, the captain was found dead, with incriminating evidence pointing towards the very party of adventurers set to be honored that night. Framed for a murder they did not commit, the party was locked in a dungeon below Ambermantle Manor to await their fate. After several hours, a surprise came in the form of one Spry Findlay, sent by Agnes at the Ivory Eye to look into the dubious imprisonment of the adventurers. With a steady hand, Findlay was able to pick the locks of the party's prison cells, allowing them to escape and reclaim their equipment. The party agreed that answers from Garion were needed, and they proceeded to fight their way through the guarded Ambermantle Manor. The party soon arrived in Garion's study, where a pale, white-skinned Meridia laid unconscious on the floor in the middle of a ritual circle. While some of the party attempted to tend to the young woman, Corin and Zhermong investigated their surroundings and found a journal clearly belonging to Garion Ambermantle, detailing the dreadful plan he had devised in his time since the return to Galdegard. Given that pure, concentrated divinity seemed to be unsuitable for the ritual he and his master had in mind, Garion opted for another concept that the two of them had theorized, the living phylactery, a hypothetical method of storing a lich's soul in a living body enriched by celestial essence strong enough to counteract the negative energies inherent in housing the soul of a lich. Garion took measures to conceive an heir with a bound deva of the higher planes, resulting in the birth of an Aasimar daughter that was the perfect candidate for the living phylactery experiment. Garion bound his master's soul into his daughter's healthy body, causing her to appear frail and sickly as she grew older. After a sufficient amount of time had passed, Meridia would be sufficiently prepared to awaken the hidden soul within, allowing Malverion to fully possess the young woman's body, and thus complete the living phylactery experiment. As the date of the plan's final execution grew closer, the hidden place of rest for Malverion exuded even more negative necromantic energy, setting into the motion the actions of the druids, a problem that was handily solved by the adventurers hired by Garion. Meridia's unconscious form then began to stir and animate, slowly levitating into the air and then coming to life. Though the process was yet incomplete, Malverion was able to awaken and possess his new vessel in order to fight off the adventurers who sought to end the experiment and save Meridia from her father's abhorrent experiment. Though Malverion proved a powerful opponent in his new vessel, Meridia was able to force her consciousness back into her own body with encouragement from Lufir, briefly putting her back in control over her body long enough to warn the party of Garion's approach. Lord Ambermantle stormed into the room, enraged, and attacked the party on sight with the intent to reassert Malverion's hold over Meridia after he finished slaughtering the problematic adventurers. Destiny, however, sided with the Order of the Candelstick. Through the martial might of Corin, Rugnar, Fanshir, and Lufir, the magical prowess of Darvin and Degra, and the cunning trickery of Zhermong, the party was able to slay Garion before he could do further harm to his daughter. Left with precious few options, Meridia feared the possibility of Malverion taking over her body again. Indeed, given the experimental nature of the unprecedented ritual, Meridia held little hope that her case could be solved by magical intervention. Resigned to her fate, Meridia pleaded with the party to put an end to her life, with the hopes that the foul aspirations of her father and his master would perish with her. A debate ensued amongst the party, as they argued over whether they would comply with Meridia's request for a clean death, or find another way to free her from becoming the living phylactery. The former was favored by Lufir, Fanshir, and Degra, while the latter was favored by Zhermong, Darvin, and Corin. In the meantime, Rugnar, who initially wished to remain silent on the matter, grew tired of the bickering and decided to bear the burden of giving Meridia the death she so desired. With Meridia dead and Scornabel's government at a loss of what to do about the news of their once-beloved lord's perverse experiments, the Order of the Candelstick made themselves scarce. The killing of Meridia left a bitter taste in the mouths of each of the adventurers, and it was without significant argument that the party disbanded and the individual members went their separate ways. After splitting up, the members of the adventuring party, known as the Order of the Candelstick, spent the following year pursuing their own individual goals. Most of them, such as Fanshir, Corin, Degra, and Darvin, continued their adventuring careers, while others sought action in other ways. They would all come to receive a letter from Grand Duke Rowena Silvershield of Baldur's Gate, requesting their presence at a hero's ball that aimed to put adventurers and mercenaries into contact with capable benefactors and local lords with worthy quests to give. The road to Baldur's Gate, however, was longer than normal for certain individuals. Following the city-bound adventure he had been subjected to, Rugnar longed for a return to the primal life he was used to in the wilds. He made his way to the Moonshae Isles and happily partook in the brutal, traditional method of execution in the area. Prisoners would be let loose in an unpopulated forest to be hunted by wild animals or trained bounty hunters, with their escape guaranteeing freedom and clemency alike. Rugnar became a dreaded Grim Reaper of sorts to the prisoners bound for execution in the Moonshaes, for they knew there was little escape from a rampaging bear and its many accompanying wolves. After receiving his letter from the Grand Duke, Rugnar decided to leave in style by assaulting and stealing a trade galleon with his summoned pack animals, putting it aside for later use upon his return from Baldur's Gate. With no place to call home after the disbandment of the Order of the Candlestick, Lufir continued traveling on his own, though he was never alone thanks to the constant companionship of his beloved wolf, Kaldoggo. He would soon discover that Kal was in fact a female wolf, bound to have a litter of pups, prompting Lufir to return to Scornabel to settle down for a while. In between caring for the pups, Lufir paid for his meals by scouting out the surrounding area for interesting sights and treasures. On one of these expeditions, Lufir came into contact with a mysterious crystal that triggered a vision of what appeared to be unfamiliar memories seen through the perspective of some unknown person. After Kal's litter of pups was old enough to survive on their own, Lufir realized just how much he had missed the thrill of adventure in the past year. Just as he and Kal were preparing to leave Scornabel for new horizons, a letter arrived from the city of Baldur's Gate, giving Lufir the destination he desired. However, fearing the possibility that his old adventuring companions could possibly be in attendance at the hero's ball, there to judge Lufir for his lack of growth in the past year, Lufir decided the naive plot to attend as someone else entirely. Zhermong got what information he could out of the governing lords of Scornabel, and then immediately set out once again in his ceaseless search for Luxador. His inquiry brought him to the criminal underground of Baldur's Gate, where he was finally able to track down his missing father in the local slave trade pens. Zhermong attempted to free Luxador, but was caught in his endeavor and put in a cell alongside his father. For months he languished alongside the man he fought so hard to free, success so close yet so far out of reach, until an opportunity presented itself for Zhermong to spring both himself and Luxador out of imprisonment. Though he was easily able to free himself, Zhermong was shocked to find that Luxador had been sold before he could be broken free of his bonds. Zhermong traced the sale to a nearby plantation in the surrounding rural areas, owned by a local noble by the name of Vodaz Mikun. When he arrived at the site of the estate, however, Zhermong was shocked to discover that the place was enveloped in a raging inferno. With little time to spare, Zhermong braved the crumbling plantation, looking for Luxador, to no avail. In the final room of the estate, Zhermong came face to face with a mysterious elven man with a distinct white streak running through his pitch-black hair. The elven man gave Zhermong a sinister smile before vanishing into a cloud of smoke, leaving the wayward rogue alone in a rapidly deteriorating manner. Though he made his escape without harm, he was left with more questions than answers, and the dreadful realization that Luxador was yet again lost to him. Without any clues to a new lead, Zhermong readily accepted the invitation to the hero's ball, hoping to learn more about the mysterious elf and the whereabouts of his father. At the ducal palace of Baldur's Gate, many adventurers gathered to share stories of their exploits and to seek further employment in quest to pursue. Zhermong and Rugnar arrived roughly at the same time, and were both able to easily see through Lufir's poor attempts to disguise himself as one Sir Reginald in an effort to impress those gathered. The trio was able to meet up with the remaining 4 members of their adventuring party from the previous year, and together they shared tense but civil discussion. The party was informed that they would be contacted for work in the coming weeks, and were encouraged to seek additional work in the city in the meantime. Rugnar, feeling nostalgic for his old hobby of brewing tea, was struck with the idea to convert an empty house in downtown Baldur's Gate into a tea house. With the financial assistance of Zhermong and Lufir, the all-natural tea house was born, co-owned by the three adventurers. The idea was compounded with the brilliant addition of permanence-enhanced unseen servants, performing the daily labor of brewing and serving the tea to customers, giving the tea house a uniquely magical quality. To ensure that the tea house was ran without incident in the case of their absence, the trio hired on a young woman named Song, a persistently melancholy tiefling prone to sighs and daydreaming. With their business set up, Rugnar, Zhermong, and Lufir eagerly awaited the arrival of possible work from the Grand Dukes to further both their individual goals and their generation of wealth alike. The wait ended soon after, when Grand Duke Various Wintergaze, the commander of the Flaming Fist mercenary company that served as the law enforcement of the city, paid the tea house a visit. Wintergaze explained that a recent trend of missing persons had been reported, prompting investigations by the Flaming Fist. Given that the kidnapped subjects were predominantly physically strong men, Wintergaze suspected an underground slavery ring, a proposition that caught Zhermong's attention almost immediately. With the powerful nose of Khal Doggo, the party was able to track the trail of missing people to the rundown old bar known as Jopelin's. After conversing with the friendly barkeep known as Jacques Black, the party came to suspect a hidden basement or complex, and their ensuing search antagonized most of the patrons of Jopelin's. The ensuing fight dragged on down the stairs leading to the establishment's basement, where the trio of adventurers confirmed that there were indeed facilities utilized for illegal slavery in the establishment. Moreover, Zhermong discovered a bill of sale detailing a particular slave that matched Luxador's exact description. The party fought their way through slavers, thugs, and even exotic beasts on their way through the underground complex beneath Jopelin's tavern. At the end of the complex, the party encountered a mortally wounded Luxador, who had been chained to a torture rack by his captors. Next to Luxador stood none other than the mysterious elf previously encountered by Zhermong. The elf introduced himself as Ixion Baylorfist, the estranged biological son that Luxador had abandoned many years ago. Ixion, overflowing with confidence and self-satisfaction, glibly informed the party that he had all that he needed, in reference to a glowing red orb sitting in the palm of his hand. Before the party was able to engage Ixion in combat, he vanished yet again into smoke, leaving behind a rapidly expiring Luxador. Zhermong and the others managed to get Luxador to the surface outside of the tavern, but the torture he had been subjected to by Ixion proved too much to survive. Luxador's last words to his son, spoken softly as rain fell around them, were words of encouragement and warning. Luxador feared Ixion's motives and pleaded with Zhermong to make sure that Ixion's plans were put to a stop, no matter whose hands did the stopping. With a few final words of reassurance, Luxador succumbed to his wounds in Zhermong's arms. Saying nothing to his companions, Zhermong gathered his father's body and disappeared into the rainy night. With Zhermong gone, and no leads to pursue, Rugnar and Lufir agreed to cut their losses after reporting the mystery solved, and returned to their home in Au Natural, with the help of Jacques Black, the bartender from Jopelin's, who agreed to work for the party after his former place of employment went up in flames. Au Natural exploded in popularity, thanks to his novel ideas to attract customers. All the while, the rivalry between the tea shop of Au Natural and its neighboring coffee shop, the Daily Grind, continued to swell over the following weeks. The tension between the two businesses swelled to such proportions that the very drama surrounding it attracted customers to both sides of the standoff. Customers proudly proclaimed their favorite of the two competing stores, and encouraged their friends and families to join them, further fueling the dispute and the customer base for both locations. To top off the dramatics, the fact that the Daily Grind was ran by the four former party members Darvin, Corin, Degra, and Fanshir was no secret. Rugnar's desire for expanding the array of teas sold at his beloved store drove him to seek imports from distant lands. It was a surprise when, during a routine stop at the docks to pick up a few crates of foreign tea leaves, the druid laid eyes upon the ship he had stolen from the Moonshays months earlier, with an angry Grand Duke Wintergaze standing before it. The Grand Duke explained that a mysterious man had dropped off the ship in Rugnar's name and then departed, leaving the mystery of just how an unregistered and likely stolen ship managed to make it to a major city's dock with only one man at the helm. As Wintergaze threatened to arrest Rugnar for stealing a ship from a neighboring nation and possibly damaging relations with Baldur's Gate, the ship began to shake and twitch. What was the ship's bow began to open into a gigantic maw, revealing rows of gargantuan teeth and giving away the imposter galleon's true identity as a massive mimic. As fate would have it, the four extant members of the previous adventure in Scornabel were present at the scene as well, having visited the docks for the coffee-related alternative to Rugnar's task. As a ship mimic tore through the docks to devour everything in sight, the 6 gathered adventurers and the underprepared city guard stood against the monstrosity. The Order of the Candelstick was reunited in proper when Zhermong made his first appearance after missing for several weeks, wielding an enchanted rapier that smelled of smoke and brimstone. Zhermong wielded powerful new spells and incantations that aided the party in repelling the beast that had threatened them, but their victory was far from reach. As the Mimic rampaged, animated flaming skulls emerged from the watery depths below to support the Mimic, drawing spells away from it to allow it to wreak havoc unimpeded. During the Mimic's rampage, the sorcerer Darvin was swallowed by the Mimic and spat out as a pile of corroded bones. Rugnar nearly met the same fate when the creature attempted to launch him into the air and catch him within its mouth. However, Rugnar's brute strength, reinforced with magical enhancement and a partial transformation into a bear, allowed him to bar the Mimic's jaw open as his companions rained blows upon it. After a difficult fight that resulted in the destruction of a great deal of maritime property and the loss of more than one life, the vicious ship Mimic was defeated. Grand Duke Wintergaze still held a great deal of suspicion towards Rugnar for the appearance of the Mimic, but given the valor displayed by the dwarf and his fellow adventurers, as well as their efforts in saving his life, he allowed them to go free with a warning. However, even the combined relief of the Mimic's demise, Zhermong's return, and the party's absolution of any potential criminal charges, there were questions left unanswered. Rugnar's religious knowledge enabled him to correctly deduce that the flaming skulls accompanying the Mimic were in fact creatures known as Cyric's Fires, foul minions of the Prince of Lies, often summoned as familiars to those who served him. The party endeavored to return to their normal lives and deduce what grudge the cult of Cyric may have had against them, a grudge so severe that it proved worth nearly destroying an entire section of a city to cause the adventurers harm. The party returned home to Au Natural and was greeted by a worried duo, Jacques Black and Song, who both also expressed surprise at Zhermong's return. The taciturn tiefling, who had seemingly aged a decade during his weeks-long absence, had delved into the most enshrouded corners of the city's underground, searching for necromantic secrets that could bring his father back to life. Zhermong was unsuccessful in this pursuit, for Luxidor's soul had apparently been split in two during his torture, thus leading to the inevitable death that followed. With total resurrection being beyond the realm of possibility, Zhermong instead sealed the remaining half of Luxidor's soul into his trusty rapier, binding both his own and his father's souls to the blade. In a twisted manner of speaking, Luxidor would forever remain at Zhermong's side. The ghost of his father would continue to advise him through veiled disappointment and resignation in the coming trials, watching Zhermong through his descent into nihilism and substance abuse. With no luck following up on the Cyric clue, the party focused on ramping up the business at Au Natural and seeking further opportunities. While Lufir learned the basics of the bardly arts from the eccentric musician Lyri Ged, Zhermong and Rugnar hatched a devious scheme to put their competitors and former party members out of business for good. Zhermong's expertise in forgeries came into play as Rugnar staged a break-in of the Daily Grind coffee house, perpetrated by magically summoned monkeys. The affectionately nicknamed Deed Monkeys proceeded to wreak havoc upon the Daily Grind in the middle of the night and successfully made off with the deed to the property. All the while, Rugnar ensured that their own establishment was ransacked by monkeys, to mirror the damage done to their neighbors, to feign innocence and mutual loss of property. By the time Zhermong was able to complete the forgery of the deed, the act was scarcely needed. The remaining 3 proprietors of the Daily Grind, disheartened both by the theft of the deed and Darvin's passing, decided to cut their losses and leave the city to pursue other ventures. Unable to prove the complicity of their tea-selling rivals, Corin, Degra, and Fanshir departed Baldur's Gate, intent on never returning. Rugnar quickly capitalized on the now empty property and expanded the size of Au Natural, adding the coffee shop's former staff to their own ranks. This notably included Song's twin brother, the tiefling named Dance. Song and Dance's presence at Au Natural was a boon for business in itself, but it wasn't enough for Rugnar and Zhermong's malicious shared business sense. With the help of Jacques Black and Dance, Zhermong and Lufir were able to speak to Song about making another attempt at her abandoned singing career. After much persuading and prodding, Song reluctantly agreed to perform a single song at the grand opening of Au Natural's second half. The grand opening drew a massive crowd that arrived to see the end of the rivalry between the two stores, and all present were stunned at the beautiful performance put on Song, with some help from her backing band of Rugnar and Dance. The positive reception gave Song a renewed sense of purpose and confidence in her skills, and she was assured that all she needed was the proper platform to showcase her talent. Au Natural had truly cemented itself as the dominant purveyor of tea and related goods in the city of Baldur's Gate, and was bringing in the gold to match. As always, it wasn't enough. Rugnar had his sights set on greater scopes than just one city. With an eye turned to Scornabel, The trio of adventurers visited their old acquaintance, Agnes Donskull, at the Ivory Eye Tavern. Agnes was delighted to hear the proposal of a partnership between the Ivory Eye and Au Naturel, and offered the trio free lodging for the night as a complimentary bonus to the deal. In the dead of night, the party was set upon by assassins, but was saved by Khal Dago's keen senses and Lufir's sharp reflexes. With luck, they were able to detain and question one of the assassins, who confessed his allegiance to the cult of Cyric. The party was now able to draw comparisons to the sigil worn on the clothes of the assassin and those worn by Ixion Balorfist and their prior encounter below Jopelin's tavern, proving their suspicion. Ixion Balorfist was in league or even possibly in charge of the cult of Cyric below Baldur's Gate, and had decided that it was time for his adoptive brother and his associates to die. Zhermong, Rugnar, and Lufir immediately began planning an expedition into the undercity of Baldur's Gate to end the threat posed to their lives once and for all, as well as to exact some revenge for Luxidor's killing. The dark caverns beneath the city of Baldur's Gate were home to all manners of undead, likely left behind by the cult of Cyric to deter any pursuers. As the trio of adventurers cut a swath through the shambling guardians of the Undercity, they stumbled upon none other than Grand Duke Kael Deadcrown, who had been following his own set of clues concerning the divine essence of Bhaal, essence that he was all too familiar with. Despite Rugnar's hatred for the Grand Duke, the party teamed up with Deadcrown and proceeded to the center of the Undercity, a massive underground cavern housing an abandoned temple of Bhaal, where the Grand Duke had clashed with his half-brother Sarevok over 100 years ago. Within the ruined temple, the party and their ally found Ixion Balorfist standing before a massive floating crystal, a larger duplicate of the memory crystals the adventurers had previously encountered. In a tense standoff, Ixion proudly proclaimed the plot that was coming to fruition before his very eyes. After being dropped off at the Temple of Helm by Luxidor years ago, Ixion was subjected to a harsh life of trials and tribulations as the priests and priestesses of Helm attempted to snuff out the spirit of murder in the young elf's heart. Ixion did in truth try to repress the dark urges, but time and time again he fell prey to outbursts and fits of violence that the Helmites eventually grew tired of trying to stop. One fateful night, Ixion learned of the temple's clergy's plan to execute him for the good of the innocent folk he might harm, and so he left the temple to search for another way of life. He soon found himself in the company of a cleric of Cyric, who taught the youth that his innate power and murderous inclinations were not to be repressed. Ixion opened his heart to the Lord of Lies, and eventually became a high priest of Cyric in his own right. Even this lofty position did little to quell the storm within his soul, however. Ixion could feel that there was more to him than a simple inclination to violence, and so he investigated the whereabouts of his estranged father in secret. It was all too easy to learn of his true heritage from old letters and cross-referencing the tales of the Bhaal spawn. Ixion decided to succeed where Sarevok had failed, and endeavored to find the lost urn that contained the last of Bhaal's essence, the urn that Garion Ammermantle and his master had once attempted to use for similar dark purposes. However, finding the relic required knowledge that was not easy to come by, knowledge concerning the lost city of Galdurgard. Ixion traversed the Sword Coast, searching for traces of the original Order of the Candlestick's passage, and from these traces he extracted the memories of their exploits. These memories were stored into crystals for storage and later viewing, but none provided the answers that Ixion sought. He abandoned those crystals no longer useful to him, not caring about who might find them, and set his sights on a more promising target. If following the path of his father and his companions was not sufficient, then Ixion would extract the memories from the source, Luxidor himself. Ixion purchased his estranged father from the slave trade not long after Luxidor and Zhermong were separated, and imprisoned him in the basement of Jopelin's tavern. The intervention of Zhermong, Rugnar, and Lufir was unexpected, but Ixion had already gotten what he needed. He had extracted half of Luxidor's soul, and it was from this half that the memories of Galdurgard were found. The other half would go on to be housed in Zhermong's blade, Lux Soul. With the knowledge of Galdurgard's location secured, Ixion prepared to open a portal to the island so that he could find the lost Bhaalite sanctum and embrace divinity. These preparations were interrupted by the arrival of 3 adventurers and Grand Duke Deadcrown, an interruption Ixion was all too happy to rectify. Before blades could be drawn and spells could be slung, Zhermong let loose the enchanted ruby die that he had acquired a year ago during the quest to stop Garion Ammermantle. The die fell directly onto the center sigil in the middle of the temple, with the number 20 facing upwards. This allowed the wellspring of magic contained within the ruby die to run rampant. A massive explosion ruptured the interior of the temple, and in the chaos, Ixion threw open a hastily prepared portal to escape the destruction. the three adventurers managed to follow through, escaping with their lives. The party, minus Grand Duke Deadcrown, found themselves in a location familiar to their experiences with the memory crystals, the abandoned sanctum of Bhaal beneath the city of Galdegard. It appeared that Ixion's desperate flight brought him closer to his destination than planned. The party hastily made their way deeper into the dungeon, experiencing visions of their adventuring predecessors and the struggles they faced in the dark hallways of the temple. The dark atmosphere of the temple drove the psyches of the party to the brink, bringing out their argumentative and even outright physically abusive tendencies. They were able to contain themselves as they reached the final room, where Ixion stood triumphant over an unconscious Kael Deadcrown. With the urn in hand and the greatest of Bhaalspawn nearly dead at his feet, Ixion claimed his right to the remaining essence of Bhaal and transformed into a monstrous avatar known as the Slayer, a gibbering horror of claws, spikes, and unmitigated hatred. The party fought desperately against the Slayer, but were hard-pressed in the struggle against divine might. In the fight, Lufir was slain, but a mortal blow from Zhermong that soon followed pushed the Slayer into a corner. Unable to contain the power of the Lord of Murder within him on the prime material plane, Ixion used his newfound divine magics to throw open a rift into the celestial plane to the very source of his essence, the throne of Bhaal. The party, including the previously slain Lufir, found themselves quite alive atop massive discs of bone, adrift in the cosmic sea beyond the mortal planes. It was there they did battle with the sources of their own murderous urges. Rugnar with a shade of Kael Deadcrown, Lufir with the slaver that once owned him, and Zhermong with a reflection of himself. After besting their trials, the party was able to cross to the center platform, where Kael Deadcrown was on his feet yet again, doing battle with an untransformed Ixion over the right to claim Bhaal's divinity for good or ill. The three adventurers intervened, with Zhermong and Lufir engaging Ixion, while Rugnar finally allowed his hatred of Deadcrown to run free. An epic struggle followed, pushing the adventurers to their mortal limits. When the final blows were struck, Ixion and Kael Deadcrown both crumbled into magical dust that returned to the wellspring of power that was the throne of Bhaal itself. With all of his essence gathered once more, the Lord of Murder emerged from his once empty throne and stepped foot onto the plains for the first time in over 100 years. Bhaal greeted the adventurers that made his resurrection possible, and remarked upon his intent to take revenge against Cyric for his death atop Borskir Bridge during the time of troubles. Not long after Bhaal's emergence, an angelic being known as a Solar arrived upon the throne of Bhaal, and proclaimed itself a messenger of Eo, the Overfather and Lord of all gods of Toril. The Solar admonished Bhaal for speaking with the adventurers of his plans, citing their innocence from divine affairs. Bhaal noted that there was no crime in a deity offering favor to exceptional mortals, and thus made an offer to the three adventurers that made his resurrection possible, to herald his return as the first Deathstalkers of the reborn god of murder, highest of the Chosen of Bhaal. In exchange for greater power and freedom to unleash it upon the realms as they saw fit, the adventurers would swear their souls to Bhaal and render themselves bound to his bidding when called upon. The decision was not as difficult as some historians would make it out to be. The events of the journey that had preceded them awoke great ill will in the hearts of the three adventurers. With nothing left to live for after the death of the only person in the world that truly mattered to him, Zhermong readily accepted Bhaal's offer. With his vengeance against Deadcrown sated, Rugnar had only one goal in mind: to tear down the blight that was called civilization, and to return the world to nature, so that wars such as the one that claimed his livelihood would cease to exist. With this plan in mind, the druid readily agreed to Bhaal's offer. Lufir was the last to make his decision. Eternally naive and easily influenced, Lufir thought back upon the traumatizing experiences of the past few months. The death of Meridia Ambermantle, the revelation of what truly happened to his parents, the destruction wrought by Ixion's machinations, and suffering the very embrace of death itself. Deciding then and there that the world was a cruel place that did not deserve his kindness nor protection, Lufir took Bhaal's offer. With the three new Chosen of Bhaal of the realms crowned atop the throne, the Solar declared the contest between the claimants of Bhaal's essence concluded, and sent the adventurers back to the prime material plane to live their lives bearing the weight of the decision they had just made. Zhermong and Rugnar awoke in the temple quite alive, but Lufir had changed. When he awoke, his skin was an ashen gray, and it was quite clear from his cold touch and his still heart that he was no longer alive. He had been made a revenant, an undead being tethered to the mortal world by an overwhelming drive for vengeance. Who this vengeance was directed at, Lufir was unsure, but he knew that achieving this vengeance would mean true and final death. To this end, Khal Dago was transformed into a hellhound to better aid her master in his deathless crusade. With their new strength granted by the power of Bhaal's resurrection, the adventurers found themselves in a position to enforce their will upon the realms. These three agents of death, now on a level greater than mortal men, took to their own separate paths to seek their own destinies into the nine hells with anyone who stood in their way. Bhaal was not a particularly demanding lord, and between their newly granted power and the wealth they had accumulated through their business ventures, the three men stood ready to make their mark on the realms forever. Even though their status as Deathstalkers was not open knowledge, the gravity of the heavy choice was apparent to those who knew the three adventurers. Song and Dance, sensing an evil change in the men they had come to know as friends, left the Au Natural tea house and departed to places unknown. Jacques Black was left to handle the businesses, while Rugnar, Zhermong, and Lufir set their sights on loftier ambitions. The cult of Cyric, in despair thanks to the resurrection of Bhaal, began to mobilize against the resurgent Bhaalite faith. Meanwhile, hundreds of Bhaalite faithful flocked to new temples and sanctums, praising the new Deathstalkers in secret. The conflict did not go unnoticed. Countless innocents were caught in the crossfire between Bhaal and Cyric, causing great unrest and paranoia in the western heartlands and Faerûn as a whole. The three adventurers knew that in order to stand against the cult of Cyric, they would need to establish bases of power to bolster their ability to act and strike back against those that wished them gone from the realms. Rugnar made his way south to the forests of Am and Tethir. Discarding his adopted name and openly going by his birth name Garen once more, the dwarf gathered as many druids as he could find that shared his hate of civilization and the danger it posed to the natural order. With these druids under his banner, Garen declared himself the Graveclaw and established a druidic order known as the Moon-Touched. This order embraced lycanthropy in order to bring themselves closer to their primal natures, and turned their aggression towards the cult of Cyric and rival druids, with more subdued views towards civilized society. Well defended in the ruins of the city of Saradouche, the Moon-Touched stood ready to do the bidding of the Graveclaw. Over the next 5 years, the Moon-Touched expanded their control to the southern forests. They clashed with the druidic order of Sylvanas, which was dissolved and assimilated into the Moon-Touched after Garen slew the order's leader, Jaheira. Not satisfied with simply recruiting other druids, Garen turned his attention to the smaller settlements of the area and ordered his druids to infiltrate them, intent on converting the local peasantry to lycanthropes. Soon the merchant hub of Tradesmeet was overrun by men and women wearing their human faces by day and their animalistic faces by night, preying on many who came to do trade in the area. In addition, Garen reclaimed his old ship, the Lunar Ursine, and began a streak of piracy in order to supply his order and forcibly convert more lycanthropic subjects. Under the guise of a massive cloud of mist, the Lunar Ursine and many ships under the banner of the Moon-Touched preyed upon innocent travelers brave enough to cross the waters. The sight of a gargantuan bear made entirely of mist passed into maritime legend, spelling doom for all who laid eyes upon it. Zhermong remained in Baldur's Gate, and immediately played upon his contacts in the criminal underworld to gather a number of unscrupulous killers and mercenaries. From this foundation he created the Rose's Thorn, an assassin's guild operating out of the back alleys and underground sanctuaries of Baldur's Gate. Though they accepted contracts of many kinds and clashed heavily with the law enforcement of the city, the Rose's Thorn had one singular end goal: the complete and total annihilation of the cult of Cyric. With Ixion's absence leaving the local cult of Cyric leaderless, the Rose's Thorn easily exterminated their presence in Baldur's Gate and took the Undercity as its lair. The rapid expansion of the ruthless Assassin's Guild caught the attention of Grand Duke Katomi Fangbattle, the city's first half-orc Grand Duke and a prodigious spymaster. Fangbattle turned the majority of her resources towards stemming the growth of the Rose's Thorn before it could become a problem. Grand Duke Fangbattle, however, greatly underestimated Zhermong's masterful command of the art of deception, and soon found herself outplayed. Zhermong slew the Grand Duke personally, and framed the entire conflict as a Grand Duke gone mad with power. One of the remaining two Grand Dukes, one Rowan Silvershield, saw no opportunity in antagonizing the rapidly ascending Zhermong, and proposed an alliance, a marriage of convenience. Zhermong accepted the proposal, and soon became Grand Duke Balorfist, adored by the populace of Baldur's Gate for his pragmatic attitude, his silver tongue, and his actions against the supposedly traitorous Grand Duke Fangbattle. Perhaps the most aimless of the three new Deathstalkers, Lufir took out his anger at the world in a very practical manner, raiding and pillaging. With his martial prowess only bolstered by undeath and the blessing of Bhaal, Lufir was easily able to bring many of the local bandits under his iron fist to do his bidding. Before long, most bandits of the Sword Coast saw joining Lufir's growing band to be the most profitable option available. Lufir named the resulting bandit army the Crimson Maw, and directed his efforts against a most profitable target, Scornabel, the city of caravans. The Crimson Maw faced some difficulty in combating the mercenary forces of Scornabel in traditional warfare, and so they turned to drastic measures, turning to the total destruction of the target. The Crimson Maw burned the entire city of Scornabel to the ground, and though it took major losses, it ultimately prevailed over the demoralized mercenary armies of a city that no longer stood. Seeing the fall of a major city drew many brigands and soldiers of fortune to the illustrious banner of the Crimson Maw. Lufir laid siege to and claimed the fortress inn known as the Friendly Arm Inn, taking it as a base of operations, and then directed his unmitigated rage towards the city of Baldur's Gate, even as Zhermong was ascending the political ladder. His forces met those of Grand Duke Various Wintergaze in his flaming fist, and Lufir was beheaded during the fight. Befitting a revenant, however, Lufir returned to life the very next day, head and all, stunning his forces. His return and unmatchable strength earned him not only the respect, but the worship of his subjects, turning the Crimson Maw from a bandit army to something almost akin to a marauding cult. Zhermong's wedding, taking place 5 years after the death of Ixian Balorfist and the resurrection of Bhaal, served to be the first reunion of the three Deathstalkers since their departure from Galdegard. The trio, having changed significantly in their time apart, had little in common anymore save for their insatiable lust for power. It was this pursuit, however, that united them in a grand scheme that aimed to propel them to even greater heights. The first phase of the plan was to stage the assassination of Grand Duke Various Wintergaze in order to both remove him from being a potential problem and to implicate the neighboring city of Elturel in his murder. Lufir waylaid the Grand Duke, who had been grievously injured in their previous fight, and executed him upon the open road just on the Baldur's Gate Elturel border. With the populace convinced of the murder of one of their beloved heroes at the hands of Elturel, Zhermong played upon the fears of the peasantry and nobility alike to garner executive military powers. In addition, he made the case to raise two of his companions, great military leaders in their own right, to fill the two empty seats on the Council of Four. Grand Duke Garin and Grand Duke Lufir joined Grand Duke Zhermong and Grand Duke Rowan on the council, and then turned their attention to following through their falsified claim to war against Elturel. The Deathstalkers of Bhaal hoped to claim the wealth and power of their eastern neighbors, and then use it to finally crush the cult of Cyric for good. The resulting war against the holy city of Elturel spanned 3 years of brutal conflict. The Knights of Tyr, the one-handed god of justice, held their line against the combined forces of Zhermong's assassins in the Rose's Thorn, Garen's lycanthropic druids of the Moon-Touched, and Lufir's marauders of the Crimson Maw, for as long as they could. The war's first year spurred a mass exodus of citizens to the south, hoping to find shelter with the nations of Am and Kalimshan as their home burned behind them. The knights were able to protect the fleeing citizens from the forces of Baldur's Gate, but eventually succumbed to the onslaught and surrendered the city. As the siege pressed on, a storm of holy retribution began to stir in the south. The exodus came to be led by a young woman named Sahar, an Aasimar and squire to one of the Knights of Tyr. Sahar had lost one of her arms to the marauding forces of Baldur's Gate, and was saved by what many believed to be divine intervention. Those following her south came to herald her as a Chosen of Tyr, a prophet of retribution against the unjust invasion of their home and the rampant conflict between the faiths of Bhaal and Cyric. Sahar found herself bereft of hope in light of Elturel's eventual fall, even as those around her sang her name to the heavens. If the might of veteran warriors of Tyr was not enough to stand against the attackers, what hope did anyone else have? In her sorrow, she found herself lost in the streets of Afkatla, the capital of Am, while the refugees stayed there temporarily while en route to Kalimshan. There she met a pair of tiefling siblings, Song and Dance, who were in hiding from old demons of their past. Song and Dance took pity on the young woman and encouraged her to take up her weapon once more and fight while she was still able. With her spirit renewed, Sahar led her people to Kalimshan. They came not as refugees, but as liberators. With her missing arm replaced by an iconic warhammer, Sahar led the slaves of Kalimport in a rebellion against their masters and successfully overthrew the Emperor of Kalimshan. She soon was afforded a vision from her devotion to Tyr, a vision that revealed the truth of the Grand Dukes of Baldur's Gate and their true allegiance to the Lord of Murder. Sahar knew what she had to do, and called upon her followers to form what would become known simply as the Inquisition. Upon the declaration of the Inquisition, Inquisitor Sahar made it quite clear to the people of Kalimshan that the Deathstalkers of Bhaal were the greatest threat to the realms, and those who were not willing to contribute to the fight were not welcome in the liberated city of Kalimport. Knights and paladins serving many different gods, tired of standing idly by as the cults of Bhaal and Cyric caused wanton destruction, traveled to Kalimshan and pledged their swords to the Inquisition. Peasants and nobles were conscripted, and many gladly volunteered to serve the cause of Tyr with their very lives. Martial law was declared in Kalimport, and the ranks of the Inquisition exploded seemingly overnight. Affirmed in her cause, Sahar turned her attention to the north. The Inquisition passed through conscripting recruits and taking what supplies they required to support the massive size of Sahar's army. The Inquisition then undertook their final march, the road to Baldur's Gate, where Sahar would meet her destiny head-on and avenge her home. The three Deathstalkers now stand in the ducal palace of Baldur's Gate, 10 years having passed since their ascension as divine agents of Bhaal. As the Inquisition creeps ever closer on the horizon, they have received a directive from Bhaal himself. Their task is to travel to Sigil, the extra-dimensional city in the center of the multiverse, and locate the lost sword known as the God's Bane, the very blade once used by immortal Cyric to slay Bhaal a century prior. With the blade in hand, the Deathstalkers are to turn God's Bane against Cyric in an ironic twist of fate, and strike him down from the very heavens for daring to slay the Lord of Murder. The Deathstalkers must retrieve the blade from whatever planar reliquary holds it, before the Inquisition can overrun Baldur's Gate, or all may be lost. Will the Inquisition succeed in their goal and destroy the heralds of Bhaal's return? Will Cyric find victory over Bhaal once again and retain his title as the Lord of the Three Crowns? Will Garen, Zhermong, and Lufir find the God's Bane and kill Cyric once and for all? Or will Sigil claim the lives of the cruel tyrants like it has so many others? The truth will be revealed, and destiny will be realized in the final arc of the Order of the Candlestick, the War of the Reapers.